Research Podcast.
How's your week, man?
What day is it? Wednesday? It's been a good week.
Yeah, it's Wednesday now, and who knows when this is going to get released. It might be a Thursday or a Sunday.
It could be a Sunday for you guys. I doubt it'll be a Sunday, but it could be another day of the week.
Yeah, we're going to release these exclusively on Sundays at 1:13 p.m.
We'll be the first. Well, that's because we'll be the first podcast to be released for the week. So
We're pioneers.
we're gonna be the first ones you're listening to.
Yeah, at 1:13 p.m. is the first of the week.
Well, that's before
As soon
anyone
as
else.
we both rolled out of bed, we have a lazy morning.
Oh, is it 1 p.m. already? Man, I gotta upload that podcast we recorded. No, I'm saying most people release it on like a Monday or weekly on a Tuesday. But if we're doing it Sunday afternoon, we're gonna be the first ones.
Head of the game, baby.
We're the first ones.
Dude, screw that. Let's just do it like Friday the week before.
There we go. Even earlier.
Yeah. You
But
can look at that as late or it's
Or
early.
super early.
Yeah.
But then again, I was thinking, I've never met anyone that's up to date, that's caught up on their podcasts that they're behind on.
Like listening to them or doing
Right.
them?
Listening to them.
Oh,
No one's ever like, oh, can't wait for this Monday. It's like, oh, I'm behind on the podcasts I like to listen to.
there's a couple that I listen to that I'm
Do
caught
you?
up on. Yeah,
Well, most of them I
maybe I
listen
should
to.
stop.
Well, join the rest of us.
Yikes!
Most of them I feel like, I mean, they're not like, unless it's like a podcast or like a show that's like relevant to what's happening today type of thing.
Like
Then-
a news podcast or
Sure,
whatever.
like a news podcast. Then, yeah, you're not necessarily like, maybe some of you out there are up to date and like, oh, can't wait till Monday when they drop a new episode. But most of us with other things going on in our lives aren't waiting for the next one to drop.
Nothing goes over better
Yeah, so I'm already
on a podcast than disparaging people who listen to podcasts.
I'm already calling out all of our listeners.
We don't even have an official sponsor yet. Looking at you, Springville Meat Co. So maybe we should just cool it with how terrible people are before we start making that money.
Fair enough. No, but it's been a good week. I don't work Fridays right now, so technically tomorrow is my Friday.
Nice.
So, which is nice.
What are you going to do on Friday?
Friday early. I don't know. I don't think I have any set plans.
Great. Well, moving on. Should we see what Wikipedia's got on today? What do you got for us, buddy?
So there it is. All right, we ready to dive into this?
Let's dive into it.
I've got a fun one for today.
What is it?
Fun one, but I mean, I guess it was a little tragic for some people,
Good.
but it was fun. It's fun for us now. I'll say that.
If it's 9/11, you introed this 100% the wrong way. I'm just going to tell you that right off the
Definitely
gate.
not. Still too soon. Still
Okay.
too soon.
All right. Okay.
Today, we're talking about the Great Molasses Flood.
Oh, bro.
Yeah. Have you heard about this?
Not enough to speak on it, but
I'm stoked about
tomorrow I will say I've heard about it enough to speak on it. You know what I'm saying?
I'm stoked about this one. This one's cool. Because one, it's a little bit of history. There's a little bit of science involved. There's a little bit of tragedy, and there's a
Beautiful.
little bit of just like not folklore is not the right word, but just kind of like, this happened in our area, in our town, and it's still like a part of the area. You know what I mean?
Can I ask you, did people die?
Yeah, people
Were
died.
lives lost?
Lives were lost.
Were hopes crushed?
Probably a few, yeah.
Dreams ruined?
I mean, that day.
All right, hit me.
Okay, well, let me set the scene for you a little bit because this plays a role. Eventually, this plays a role as to the cause of this terrible tragedy. So, the Great Molasses Flood was also known as the Boston Molasses Disaster.
Try saying that 5 times fast.
Boston Molasses Disaster. That was pretty good.
That was
Honestly,
pretty good.
I didn't think I'd get through it for one time.
Honestly, Boston Molasses Disaster sounds like an awesome band name.
Sounds like a dope band name.
What kind of music would they play? I mean, it's Boston.
It's got to be grunge or like punk rock,
I
right?
was thinking, honestly, like,
The Irish?
yeah.
Like Scottish rock? For the Boston Molasses Disaster. It's a bagpipe.
Boston Molasses disaster.
It's a bagpipes only cover band.
Dude.
I'd listen to that. So this happened in the year 1919.
Okay.
In January. So the exact date was January 15th of 1919. So this happened just a little over 100 years ago. So...
is that why we don't have molasses today?
We definitely still have molasses today.
No, I don't think so,
It's
dude.
it's a pretty big thing.
If I know two things in this world, that Boston is in Connecticut and that we don't have molasses.
Specifically why I wanted to do this, because of where you think
Did you
Boston
try and
is.
prove me wrong? You bastard.
So just some statistics of this, and
This
we'll
is
get...
going to change every future one I'm ever going to do on this podcast, by the way. I didn't know that we could choose a topic to further a personal vendetta against the other person. So
Honestly, that was super unintentional.
my next one's going to be about how to send an email.
That'd actually be super informational for me.
Chromebook.
Yeah, it doesn't update anymore.
Yeah. It's so old that when you open it, it says,
Why?
why? Kill me.
It's hoping that I'll take it out back and shoot it. So, some brief statistics about this flood. It was caused from a giant tank of molasses that exploded.
Okay. So well, I was going to say a distillery. I guess they probably didn't distill molasses, but
They did.
okay.
We'll get into that actually. First of all, when this tank exploded, this tank was outside.
So was this at like a factory for it, or just like
Yeah, so I guess
the mayor of the
let me-
town, the
let me-
richest dude in 1919,
Let me
just
do
had
that.
a bunch of molasses?
So molasses, probably especially back then a little bit more. I don't feel like molasses is like everyone knows what it is, but not a lot of people use it as much anymore.
Okay.
So it's a common thing that's used a lot in baking and flavoring foods because it is kind of a sweet thing. Although just like raw molasses, it's not very sweet. I don't know if you've ever tried it.
I haven't.
Because I remember thinking as a kid, like, because my mom would bake with the molasses, and my grandma, and I remember watching old movies, and it was like, oh yeah, you dip bread in molasses, and it's like a tasty treat. So I remember one time, like, I was
Okay, but to be fair, dude, they were also like just ripping up pieces of bread and putting them in milk too.
Oh
So,
yeah, well that's delicious.
All right, bro.
My grandpa used to do that, and so that's like a treat we still do.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Do you put anything in it? It's
No,
just bread and milk.
Bread and milk, yeah.
That's not delicious, dude.
Certain bread, like
You know-
like a hard roll.
If you mix that up, bread and milk, and leave it out on a counter for a few days, that's how white people are made, dude. That's how you and I were made.
I thought we were conceived
It's the most bland thing
in a
on
bowl.
earth. You're taking bland white bread and bland milk and just shoving that together. All right, continue.
Anyway, so molasses is it's popular in baking and cooking. It's actually kind of the main contributor of brown sugar. So
Okay.
most brown sugar is pretty much just refined sugar and molasses.
Okay.
They refine it. Molasses is made from refining down sugar cane or sugar beets, and it turns into kind of cane sugar,
Okay.
basically.
Right
But then
on.
it's got a few different like flavors, textures, and then they combine that with sugar, and that makes brown sugar.
So did you find out because there's like dark brown sugar and then light brown sugar. So is it just like a difference of the molasses content?
I think it's probably just a concentration thing.
Nice.
Probably the darker stuff is more concentrated with molasses.
It's been fed bread and milk less, so it's
It's been less fed.
not as
not as white.
not as bland. Right on.
So it's used in that a lot, and then it's actually when molasses is fermented, it's used to produce ethanol, which is used to distill alcohol. So this particular event happened at a distillery, specifically the Purity Distilling Company in Boston, Massachusetts. So it happened.
Dude, I know my Boston, Connecticut. You know what I'm saying? I know it.
Weirdly, you do though.
I do.
So it happened in the North End neighborhood of Boston, which is actually known as as the oldest residential community in Boston.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Which would make it one of the oldest residential communities in the United States.
In the United States, yeah. It said it was established in the 1630s. So
A smooth 150 years before the United States became a thing.
Yeah, people were building houses. So, I mean,
Yikes.
it's right. It happened. There's a harbor there. It's not like the Boston Harbor, but there is a harbor there.
Okay.
So yeah, it's right on the coast. Like people would have showed up to this country and just started settling there. So yeah, it's easily one of the most oldest neighborhoods in the entire country.
Okay.
Pretty wild.
That is wild. Like that's like multiple generations of like at least 2 or 3 generations of people could live and die there before the United States is even a thing.
Oh yeah.
Under the rule of the old British themselves, struggling every day to figure out why, just why. You know what I mean?
Why.
Eating beans for lunch and breakfast,
Beans and white bread.
drinking beans for dinner,
Aren't we glad we left?
blending up beans for their babies, mixing that with Earl Grey tea for the morning.
It's so gross.
That's I know British people, bro.
A little too well.
For our British listeners, please don't send us an email. I know that that's not real.
We get it. You're upset.
You're upset.
We left. So anyway, happened in the North End neighborhood. So pretty cool. So, which makes sense. This area's been around a long time. There's factories. There's this distillery. So like stuff is happening there. It's a pretty populated area.
Sure.
So when this happened, I'm gonna dive into the statistics of this, and then we'll talk about how they cleaned it up, and then we'll talk about actually how it happened.
Okay.
Or maybe we'll reverse that. But anyway, so
You do you, man.
this molasses was kept in a tank. It was often brought over because the sugar cane and the beets that they would use to refine to then make molasses was often imported to the distilling company. And so they had a tank that it seems like it was just right there on the harbor.
Okay.
That they would put it into. And then from that tank, it was actually piped over to the distillery. It was close enough that they could just pipe it over.
Sweet. Do you envision that was a hand pump? They just had some poor 4-year-old kid before labor laws were happening, just pumping.
I feel like it was more of a gravity type thing.
Nah, dude, I'm pretty sure they just
downhill.
They had a kid who was a part-time chimney sweep, part-time molasses pumper.
Like, where the heck is that kid?
Just a face so covered in soot that he could barely see.
We've got 8,000 gallons of molasses to pump, and he's off rolling that metal ring down the streets.
What's he trying to play?
He's 8 years old. He's got to provide for his family.
Get that kid more bread and milk and get him pumping.
So the tank that they kept it in on the harbor, 50 feet tall.
Wow.
And had a 90-foot diameter.
Wow.
And held roughly 2.5 million gallons. And at the time of this explosion, it was at near capacity.
Oh my gosh.
They estimated around 2.3 million gallons of molasses, which is, I don't know. I can't wrap my head around how much that it. Whenever I think of a gallon, whenever someone's like, "Oh, it's like on your car, it's a 20-gallon tank," I just think of 20 individual gallons of milk.
Just stacked.
Because that's the unit.
Just stacked bottom to top.
Because visually,
vertically,
that's what a gallon looks like.
Yeah.
It's always in milk form.
Okay.
So 2.3 million gallons.
I just did a quick Google search, so this is totally unverified, but for an Olympic-sized swimming pool, I'm seeing that the average amount of gallons in there looks like around 575,000 gallons.
Oh, so it's like quarter, not even a quarter.
Yeah. So you're talking about like 4 Olympic-sized swimming pools full of molasses in this holding tank.
That's unbelievable.
That poor little chimney sweep molasses pumper, dude. His tiny little arms.
Man, just pumping.
Just tired. Just screaming for milk.
Ugh. So when this thing exploded, so I guess I should say too that 2.3 million gallons of molasses weighed roughly 12,000 metric tons.
Dude, that's another number that's just like incomprehensible.
Yeah, right? Like how many
much
cars is that?
Yeah, I was going to say, how much does a car weigh?
Yeah.
Like a ton?
I mean, depending on your car, yeah.
Like a small, like a Geo?
A ton is roughly 2,000 pounds.
Okay, yeah, so like a Hyundai Sonata?
There you go.
I don't know.
Shout out to Hyundai.
Shout out to Hyundai, one of our future sponsors.
Not a current sponsor.
Hyundai. Drive.
Live Moss? when this tank exploded.
So hold on. So
Yeah,
12,000 metric tons.
12,000 metric tons.
So that's like 6,000 Hyundai Sonatas.
Yeah.
So for anyone wondering or trying to wrap your mind
No,
around
that's
that
more.
number,
That's probably 12,000 Hyundai Sonatas. Because you figure a Sonata's about 2,000 pounds.
yeah,
Holy Sonata.
holy Sonatas.
Well, actually, this is going to play a role in it. This is a time when people didn't own cars. It was either walking or you were on a horse.
Yeah. So if you're yelling Hyundai Sonata,
You're thinking ahead.
you're a witch.
So when this thing finally blew, it says that it traveled up to 35 miles an hour as it flooded the streets. And a 25-foot wave moving
Oh
at
my
roughly
gosh.
35 miles an hour just came crashing through this North End neighborhood.
Dude, how terrifying. Because that's like you've seen a car go by at 35 miles an hour.
Oh, man.
And that's not terribly fast. You know what I mean?
Sure.
That's slow enough that if you watch a car drive by, you're like, all right, I can see every detail of that car.
Sure.
And like I can see it coming or whatever. You know what I mean? But like you can't run 35 miles an hour.
No, you're not outrunning that. And it's also a wall. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a wall that's
like-
moving at you at 35 miles an
Yeah.
hour.
So like I'm saying it's slow enough to see coming, but fast enough you can't leave. You know?
Yeah, what do you do?
That little chimney sweep's toast already because that thing blew up.
Done. Well, think about this too. It's also molasses. You're not swimming out of that.
Oh yeah, no
Right?
kidding.
It's
a real like
it's a lot
trapped in amber
denser.
Jurassic Park type situation.
you know, for real. That's exactly what it is.
Yikes.
When we get into it, they had to find some people, and that's how they found them.
You're kidding me.
No, that's the tragic part of this story is there were deaths, and we'll get into that in just a minute. Actually, we're going to get into it right now. That's my next statistic. So, in this accident,
We call that an instant tease and turnaround is what we're talking about because he teases it, we're going to get there, and then bam, instant
like
gratification.
most of my relationships.
You're welcome. That's yet another innovative technique that we're using on the Low Grade Research Podcast.
Amazing.
That and saying the word innovative.
Gives us a little more credibility.
It's an edge.
So in this accident, 21 people were killed
Holy smokes.
and 150 were injured.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. So it was no joke.
How do you, if it's a 25-foot wall of molasses coming at you, how are you getting injured in a way that you're leaving? You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, it was 25 feet initially.
Okay.
So it didn't carry that way through,
Oh, sure.
right? Because it's eventually going to, like, the surface area of the town is going to grow bigger as it goes out,
Yeah,
right?
that
So it eventually comes
2.5
down.
million gallons of molasses
Yeah,
is going
right.
to thin out eventually.
But eventually, I mean, but even still, like if you read the article, there's people talking about accounts of once that wave kind of crashed and spread through, it actually like flipped up a boxcar that was there.
Wow.
And then basically just this like 3-foot wave was kind of trickling through the town. And if you didn't outrun it, you were caught up to above the knees in molasses, and then you just kind of got stuck.
Sheesh.
So especially because also it's January. So once this gets out, it's got cold. It becomes more viscous,
Yeah.
gets thicker. So you're basically just stuck out there. And if you're a kid, if you're that poor chimney sweep walking through, it's up to your nipples. And you're not swimming out of that, right? You're just kind of waiting for someone to pull you out.
Weird move for you to talk about kids and yeah, I mean, I can see I bet even like hypothermia and stuff because Boston's not a warm place in the wintertime. You know what I mean?
Not at all.
So you're going to be
Not at
trapped,
all.
even as an adult, you're going to be trapped 3 feet. So you're up to your hips.
Yep.
And then you're just going to sit and be kind of exposed, right, to the elements,
And
right?
you're right at the harbor too, so you've got that cold ocean breeze
Yeah.
coming through the town.
Did it talk? Well, I don't want to jump ahead, but I would be curious to know if you had information about how they clean this up.
I do.
Yeah,
We'll get into that.
All right, I'll let you get there.
So, well, we can talk about cleanup, but let's. Well, I just want to mention a little bit more about the fatalities.
Yeah.
Just because, like I said, there was 21 people that passed away from this, ranging from 78 years old was the oldest man, all the way down to there was 2 children at the age of 10.
Okay,
that
that's
were caught in
terrible
this.
for the 2 children at the age of 10.
Terrible.
No doubt. But can you imagine living a full life in, what is it, the year
1919.
1919, when the life expectancy was less than it is now?
Oh, yeah, he was thriving.
It's like what, in the United States, like 82 or something?
Something around there.
But like possibly the richest, fullest life of anyone you know. All of your friends have died from, losing teeth and getting eaten by sharks and whatever.
Just basic infection.
Getting beat up with Louisville Sluggers in Boston. And then you make it clear through. You're the champion of your friend group. Only to get sucked in and murdered by a wave of molasses.
You're the oldest person you've ever heard of, and you get taken out
Straight up.
by an ingredient to make cookies.
Yep. Yep.
What a way to go.
What a way to go.
Well, the other funny thing too, well, not funny thing, but the other interesting thing is, so it lists the names of all the people that
Oh, wow.
that were killed in this accident, and it also lists their occupation.
Okay.
And this 78-year-old man says he was a messenger, so he was working, I assume,
Wow.
out delivering messages and stuff.
He was on his little, what would he have been on? A speed bike
Probably
for
his
sure?
feet.
Probably a moped?
He's 78 years old. He was walking.
No, dude, it was 1919. That dude's on a moped for sure.
So yeah, kind of a wide range of.
I'm curious to know, because we're before child labor laws and stuff, did it put an occupation next to those 10-year-old kids?
No, it didn't. It just said they were a child. So, who knows what they were doing out there?
Was there any occupation on that list that kind of sticks out as,
So
like,
there was,
why are
yeah.
you there?
Great question. Well, not necessarily that why are you there, but next to the distillery was actually like a paving yard.
Okay.
And so several of the people on this list that were killed, about 7, 1, 2, 4, 5, okay, 6, were employees at this paver yard. So, I mean, when this thing blew, it obviously rushed out in all directions.
Yeah.
So it swept over into the neighboring paving yard and killed several people that were working there, and then just down the street. And pretty much, I mean, it just seems like, yeah, anyone that happened to be there, because a lot of the occupations it lists are anything from these laborers at the paving yard to a driver or a firefighter, a motorman, whatever that means. Someone here is unemployed, so he was just there.
Yikes.
Yeah, wrong place, wrong time. But he wished he had a job that day.
So this is truly a melting pot of melting pots.
Oh, for sure.
People of all walks of life.
All walks of life, and if you read through the names, like all types of names from countries all over, right? So
Well,
it really got all of them.
I'll say this. We're going to come up with the job that unemployed guy should have had, would have had he survived,
Okay.
right after this.
Okay, so let's talk about why and how this happened. So, like I said, it was January. Like, average temperatures in January on the coast in Boston are like teens on average, right? It said specifically
Bro,
the day
you got
before.
that wind chill too?
Oh, it's brutal.
That's like negative degrees.
Brutal. That wind coming off the ocean like that is just the worst cold you can experience.
Yeah, you're just say I don't know, you were a 78-year-old messenger riding your moped through the streets, the dirty cobblestone streets of Boston in 1919.
Mm-hmm.
10
Oh, it's
degrees
cold.
outside with wind chill, so you're
He's wearing-
negative 30 degrees.
He's wearing every piece of clothing he's ever seen.
Yeah, dude. So he's the oldest person he knows, and he's wearing the most clothes he's ever seen.
So,
Oh, by the way,
real
we
quick,
teased
yeah.
that we would come up with the job of that guy, right? So
Yeah.
what's your guess?
I think he should have been a barber. Are you saying what he should have been?
Yeah, dude.
I think that would have been a fine job to have because it could have kept you indoors. Right?
Yeah.
And as long as you weren't right next to the tank, you would have been fine.
But he wouldn't have been a
Because
good
within-
barber. Like, he was doing, like, flat tops. He was ahead of his time. But at the 1919, what the
Well, he's
hell,
30,
bro?
He's 34.
Oh, yeah.
So Yeah, way ahead of his time.
He's at the time, he's 3/4 of the way through his life. He's looking at that 70-year-old guy and going, "Oh my gosh, why won't you die?"
I don't believe it.
Little
Are you
did
the
he
oldest
know.
person I've ever seen?
He wouldn't be for long.
He's like, I may be, but I have a message for you.
Get out of the way, I'm riding my moped.
Here's your message. So there was a couple of factors that played into this tank exploding. We talked about the cold weather.
Mm-hmm.
So the day before, it said the air temperature was roughly hovering around 2 or 3 degrees.
Oh my gosh.
So just cold.
Oh, the cold doesn't even cut it.
But then that morning, as you keep listening to our podcast, you're going to learn I struggle with words. Typically.
The crazy part is that we've cut out, what you're going to listen to is probably going to be around, the end product is maybe around an hour or whatever, but we've cut out 2.5 hours of dead space.
Of just me trying to remember words.
Just Mitch going,
what's that word? But so untypically of the time, that morning, it was actually turned out to be kind of a warm day.
Okay.
So saying that temperatures bounced up to around 40 degrees.
Oh boy.
So that's a pretty big jump. So
I think I'm seeing some connecting dots here with the laws of physics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the molasses tank was already partially filled that morning.
Right.
So it had sat all the previous day before in that 2-degree weather.
Sure.
And molasses is a lot denser of a liquid, a lot denser of a substance than, say, water, for example, right?
Right.
So, and we know that when things get colder, they technically shrink.
Mm-hmm.
You may not be able to see it on a smaller scale, but when you're working with that quantity of a substance like that, it's a lot more visible.
With
right?
5 Olympic swimming pools of molasses.
Yeah, worth of molasses. So it was already partially full. It didn't say exactly how full, but less than half.
Okay.
So in combination, not only did the temperature rise, but a ship was bringing in a new shipment that day.
Okay.
And to transport it into the tank better, they had been warming it up on their ship so that to decrease the viscosity. When it moves better, which is which?
To save little Timmy Pump House, his tiny arms.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they'd been warming it up on the boat previously so that it would move through the piping better and flow into the tank.
Okay, so it's 1919. How are they warming it up on the boat? Because they're going to be on like a wooden ship.
Well, it's also 1919. So when was Titanic? It's like
when wasn't Titanic?
We've got like boats, right?
Titanic is part of my
Titanic
everyday.
is every day.
Yeah.
So we've got like real boats and like cruise liners and like shipping boats starting to come around.
We do have real boats. But for the people listening, 1918 boats were just a figment of imagination. Just
people
folklore.
Dreamed of.
Yep. But 1919, boats hit the scene, man.
People lost their minds.
Out of sight.
What, are you going to sit on top of the water?
Yeah.
What are you, nuts?
What are you, nuts?
So I'm not sure exactly how they warmed it up, but it said that they'd previously started to get it warm so that it would travel into the tank better.
Sure.
On top of that, it is 1919. The year earlier that year, in the previous year, 1918,
when there were no boats.
the bills for prohibition had started getting documented.
Ah, okay.
So, as kind of like in a rush, and this is a distillery, so it's kind of like in a rush to like, oh, they've got these bills going through Congress to ban all alcohol.
Yeah.
We got to get out as much as we can before these laws kick in.
Oh, right.
Which is roughly like a year and a half-ish.
Make your money, you know what I mean?
2 years before like legislation actually kicks in from when it's like going through offices and stuff.
I didn't realize it was such a time period.
Yeah, I didn't really either, but it mentions that in this article that, I mean, it's at least a year.
The way you learn about that in school, it's like
next day.
Yeah, like it's a Thursday.
Yeah.
And alcohol's legal, and then Friday.
Yeah.
Just
you're done.
Tough luck.
No, so they kind of knew this was going to happen, so they're like, we got to get as much as we can through before basically this whole distillery shuts down, right? So because of that, they had a ton of molasses on that boat. And they just filled up that tank.
Just speedy.
Just and as full as they could. As
Jeesh.
full as they could. So you get the combination of cold molasses in the bottom of this tank, fill it with hot, warm molasses,
Right.
put it in a not sealed, but like pretty airtight type container.
Right.
And then the temperature is skyrocketed from 2 degrees to 40 degrees.
Jeesh.
That all starts heating up.
That's 40 degrees Celsius too, huh?
No, it's Fahrenheit. That's like 8 degrees Celsius. I don't get Celsius.
I don't either.
Whenever people
And
are like, "Oh, it's 40 degrees. It's so hot." I'm like,
Okay,
what
no,
the hell
I
are you
think
talking
they
about?
say like 20 degrees, and that's like
Yeah, 26
in
is
your
balmy.
hundreds.
Yeah.
No, that's like you're over 100 degrees, aren't
And
you?
what is it? I can't remember the
We're gonna
math
have to look it
formula
up. I'm
in
thinking
my head.
40 degrees Celsius.
20 degrees.
This is the part of the podcast where we both frantically Google search something, which is super cool for like listenership. You know what
It's
I mean?
cool for
But-
us. So 40 degrees Fahrenheit is 4 degrees Celsius. 4.4 degrees Celsius.
Oh, okay, and 40 degrees Celsius is 104 Fahrenheit. So I
That's
was
a
way
warm
off.
day.
That is still, yeah, that'd be crazy. So that in my scenario I just created, it's 2 degrees Fahrenheit one day. We shoot up.
We shoot up
100 degrees.
to the hottest day they've ever seen in a January. The soles of the rubber on their shoes is melting to the
The
asphalt.
hottest day that 78-year-old man's ever seen in his long, long life. All right, sorry.
So as we know, when liquids, especially liquids, warm up, they start to expand.
Yep.
So they've packed this tank full of molasses. The bottom half is cooled, compressed, smaller volume, and now it's heating up. And eventually it heats up and heats up and heats up that the tank just can't take it anymore.
Right, because the molasses on top is already expanded because it's already warm.
It's already hot.
So it's got nowhere to go.
It's already hot. In addition to that, it sounds like they kind of jumped through some loopholes when it came to building this tank.
That's so crazy, dude, because no disaster after this has ever been because someone just cut corners. You know what I mean? People don't do that. So
Well, we don't. People still cut corners, but they're a lot smaller corners today than they were back then, right?
well, I don't think that's true either, but I think they cut them just as big, dude.
So in 2016, as like a project, Harvard University conducted studies
Yep.
and did all the engineering to see like what were the potential causes of all this problem, all this stuff.
In
They gathered-
2019, is that you said?
2016.
So 100 years later, they finally got around to it?
100 years later, they started like getting the specifics of it, because back then they did realize, hey, I think we should have made that tank with a little bit thicker steel,
Oh, yeah, sure.
stuff like little stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then in 2016, a team of scientists and students from Harvard actually like got the specific numbers,
Yeah.
and we're like, yeah, they should have used this gauge of steel. It should have been supported by this gauge of beams and things like that.
That's pretty amazing for that group, though, too. Because if you think
pretty
about
cool.
it, that group of scientists are just people who got into Harvard because their parents donated a bunch of money and then they got on the water polo team or whatever, right? So pretty cool that you could go from that to producing real research.
Yeah, right. And a lot of this is just kind of like, well, some of it is just like the steel they should have used should have been almost twice as thick. A lot of the rivets holding in the different panels of steel, a lot of them weren't super secure. It was just kind of half-assed, it seemed like.
Yeah.
So there was just like item upon item structurally that it should have failed anyway. And on top of that, they filled it to the absolute brim, right? So they just totally set themselves up for a terrible accident, and then they got the hottest day that January's ever seen in Boston.
Yeah.
And it just, caused this explosion.
To be fair, though, I would imagine that even if you were like, this is such a crazy thing to have happened anyway, because like even at the
Totally.
time, if you're willing to deal in molasses, you're the dude who's running this distillery, and there's never in 1,000 years you would think that there would be basically an ecological disaster
right?
involving molasses. You know what I mean?
Someone's gonna die today, and it's because of molasses.
Yeah, like I bet the
that
only
thought's
time
never
people
crossed your
had
mind.
died before is like someone slips and falls into the tank or something. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
or they eat too much molasses.
diabetes, and then they
just
die that slow
peace
death.
out. Yeah, I don't know. Jeesh, man.
In some of the accounts, they mentioned, blocks and blocks away, people were like, "Yeah, we heard this like a little bit of a boom, and then we
Sheesh.
felt the ground shake."
No way.
Yeah, which is wild.
That is
Which
wild.
is just wild. I can't imagine. All right, so anyway, let's talk about how they cleaned it up, because it would take a lot of mops to clean up a sticky mess like this.
It sure
I dropped
would.
a jar of jam one time, and I swear I cleaned it for like an hour, and for a week, my sock would still get caught on the floor. You know what I mean? Let alone 2.3 million gallons of molasses.
But you cleaned that. To be fair, for full transparency, he just sat laying on his tummy next to the spill, just slurping it
Just
up.
lapping it up.
So he never actually wiped it up or mopped it or anything.
I wiped it up with fresh white bread, just off the floor.
Yeah, that he had just dipped in milk and then soaked up the...
So it says that the cleanup crews, which I'm sure were just volunteers, like at that point, a bunch of people just lost their jobs because their buildings got destroyed.
Sure, and all the 58-year-old messengers are like, we just lost our
They're
leader.
like, we can't walk through that.
Yeah.
We just lost our leader. Like, what are we gonna do? Like,
Yeah.
he was our whole inspiration. So cleanup crews use salt water from the bay or from the docks to shoot up onto the streets to kind of wash it away, and then they threw out sand to absorb all of that. So they kind of
Wow.
sprayed salt water out to, loosen it up, kind of so it wasn't just so thick and sticky, and then would hopefully absorb it with the sand.
And then just haul it out, huh?
But there was so much that even still they said, so this happened in January, and they said that the harbor was still brown until like midsummer.
Oh my god.
So like 6 months, like the ocean is still brown outside.
Dude, it's like killing all the fish. in that
I'm
bay.
sure. I would be curious to see like how like fishing did that year,
So
right?
terrible, dude.
Like just up, or maybe it brought in more.
Maybe it did.
It's not like an oil spill. The fish were like, oh yeah, the water tastes way
except
better over here.
It's also just like gumming up their gills with molasses too. You know what I mean? Like,
Wow, we're pulling in some really fat fish. Oh, so the cleanup in the immediate area took weeks. With it just says several hundred people contributed to the effort.
oh my.
Because it's like I say, it's such a hard thing to like clean up. So they said, and with all the people going through, one, helping with the cleanup, two, it was a pretty populated area, so people are just walking through. Because of all the foot traffic, they said that, they were seeing molasses footprints on like the subways, in telephone booths, into people's homes, and they say, and it says that
I bet burglaries went way down though, dude.
The burglaries?
Yeah, because if you can see the dude's footprints, you know what I mean?
Well, at least for that week. But it just says for like years after, it just seemed like that area of Boston was sticky.
Ugh.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you touch one thing, you're just not running away from sticky.
Right, like that jam. I just about said ranch. That jam that you cleaned up.
Like that jam. So yeah, don't
slurped up off the ground.
Don't underestimate the sticky. So yeah, thousands and thousands of people living in the area, walking through, and even if there's a little bit, walking your way to work, onto the subway, onto the train, onto the trolleys.
Which is bad as it is, though,
Sticky
right? It's
everywhere.
like we've all been on public transportation.
Yeah, it's already sticky.
Yeah. Yes. And for probably reasons you don't care to truly find out, but it's sticky and slimy for one reason or another. And so you're just going to compound that by adding straight up sugar.
Yeah, freaking just madness.
Yeah.
So it took several years before they felt like things were kind of back to normal. So the area today, we'll talk about what it looks like today.
Yeah.
So they didn't end up rebuilding the distillery.
Okay.
If you can believe it.
Probably good reason.
Because they were sued for a lot of money.
Yeah, they probably straight up killed that dude in the streets.
Yeah, pretty much everyone.
Did they lower the owner of the distillery into a vat of molasses slowly?
Boil him!
Boil him.
It's the crowds around. Yeah, you coming to the square today?
We got a boil on.
We're gonna boil the distillery owner. Can you imagine? Yeah, this was 1919, not the 1800s.
Dude, they're also doing a lobster boil at the same time.
If we're gonna eat lobster and boil a guy alive
And then
molasses.
frying chestnuts. Dude, that sounds like that's a hell of a weekend. You know what I mean?
So obviously it closed. It says the specific numbers. I forgot to write them down. But pretty much everyone that was involved in some way, especially those that lost a family member,
Yeah.
was paid out and
Wow.
received compensation for it. It was roughly around $115,000 today money for each person
Whoa.
that was killed.
I was fully expecting you to say it was around 115 grand total that like they just
Oh
split
no!
up.
So in today's money,
Yeah.
families were compensated. Which that's a terrible way to put it. Like compensated for
Yeah,
your
but,
your
I mean,
father
they were,
you just
though,
lost, right?
Yeah, your messenger.
Roughly $115,000 for the loss of their loved one.
I mean, that's no amount of money is ever going to
No.
be enough, right?
Right.
But it is surprising to me that that distillery was making bank.
Oh yeah.
Because that's, what'd you say, 25 people died?
21.
21, and then 150 were
100
injured?
people were injured. Yeah.
So I'd imagine, you count for a few of those being part of the same family or whatever.
Yeah.
But like that's still, 100 some odd people who each get 115 grand.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's a lot of
Well,
money.
that was just for the deaths. The people that were injured didn't
Oh.
receive as much, but they were still compensated for their injuries and things
Sure.
like that.
Like a gift bag full of molasses candies or
Probably,
something.
Yeah, some rum.
A pat on the back and a kick down into the street. Sheesh.
You can come back anytime. That's what they
No
said.
thanks.
So today, the property is actually a recreation complex with like little league baseball fields and
Nice.
stuff. So there's a little league baseball field, playground, and bocce courts, and it is called Langone Park.
Langone Park.
Yeah, Langone Park,
Okay.
and it was built in, I believe, 1973.
Wow.
So up until that point, it seems like it was just kind of an empty lot
Yeah.
next to that paving company,
Yeah.
paving factory that they had there.
Well, I mean, it probably had like bad juju. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that was kind of that's what kind of it seemed like when I was reading through this. It was a tragic, obviously a very tragic thing, and so they weren't too eager to build something up. But the actual foundation where that tank was is still there.
Okay.
But it's underneath, they say it's about 20-ish inches underneath the ground, underneath the middle of a baseball field.
Wow.
That's out there. And on the 100-year anniversary, they had a commemorative event, and those that attended, they gathered in a circle around where that slab was, and they read off all the names of the people that passed away.
Oh.
Molasses. So, and then at this park, there's a little plaque that commemorates the events of that day, and I can read what it says.
Yeah.
It says, on January 15th, 1919, a molasses tank at 529 Commercial Street exploded under pressure, killing 21 people. A 40-foot wave of molasses buckled the elevated railroad tracks, crushed buildings, and inundated the neighborhood. Again, words. Structural defects in the tank combined with unseasonably warm temperatures contributed to the disaster.
Wow.
Which, that's nice they put that there, but that leaves so many questions if you just happen to be there and don't know what happened that day.
No doubt. And if you don't have access to Wikipedia, you know what I mean?
You're like, whoa.
What the
Molasses
hell
waves.
is happening in Boston?
This is a baseball field. So
Yeah, that's
many
wild.
questions. So anyway, so that's what I got.
Wow. So I guess the next time you see a giant tank, could be a water tank, could be a molasses tank. Moral of the story is steer clear, right?
Yeah, I'd get miles away.
Miles away.
Because like it said in that last bit, like there's an elevated train that goes through Boston. It completely swept out the beams underneath, and the tracks collapsed in certain parts.
Oh my gosh.
So it just keeps developing the more and more you learn about it.
Wild. Unless you just read that one plaque at the baseball field.
Yeah, then you leave with a lot more questions.
Well, sweet man, that was awesome.
Yeah, pretty cool. So you guys can check out this article on Wikipedia. If you just search Great Molasses Flood, it'll pull up that article and all the links related to it.
And we'll be sure to post any pictures that are in the article to our Instagram account. And then...
There's good stuff there.
Well, thanks, buddy. So that's been the Low Grade Research Pod, right? So
That's it.
Where can they find us?
You guys can find us wherever you get your podcasts, wherever good quality podcasts are sold.
Apple
for free.
Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts.
Love it.
Probably not Luminary because you got to pay for that.
No, I don't want that.
If you're downtown Hollywood, some guy who's going to hand you a CD, we're going to be on that CD. Wherever they're sold, wherever they're given out.
Just listen to it in a public library.
Yeah.
Not on your own computer. But we can be, and then you can find us on Instagram at Low Grade Research Pod.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. Good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you, man.
I'll catch you next week, pal. He's doing a thumbs up, so...
Just cut the mics.